welcome to the podcast, Dr. Christina.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. So I met Dr. Christina on a summit that we did, and I really, really connected with your message. So I knew I had to have you on because I felt like we had a lot in common. You had actually walked people through a heart connection, heart and womb, and I was like, okay, she's speaking my language. But I know you also have a lot of experience in this kind of field and the science aspect of it, and I would love for the listeners to hear your origin story, because I always like to start with an origin story.
Yes, it's important because I actually haven't always been a naturopathic doctor, and it's my own struggles with my mental health that brought me to become one. So in a nutshell, I was diagnosed with depression, and that I was prescribed medications, and I then actually swung into a psychotic episode while on those medications. And so then I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1. And what I did with that is I was like, well, that's not happening to me. Like, what's this? And I'll preface that with I am adopted, so there is no ability for me to look to my left or my right to verify the truth of that. So I didn't accept the genetic theory. And I do subscribe to the theory that genes load the gun, yes, but lifestyle pulls the trigger.
I love that saying. That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, it does. And so I was walking through the world with this mask, though, which is not good in the sense that I was playing the role or persona that I had it all together. But yet I was really struggling on the inside. And then I had a suicide attempt that left me in a coma with kidney failure. And I was on dialysis and told I would need a kidney transplant. And that was really my origin story, if you will. Like, that was the rock bottom point for me. And I was given a book to read by Marianne Williamson called A Return to Love.
I love that book.
Yes. And there's a beautiful quote about surrender and learning to accept ourselves. And I realized that, goodness me, I'm walking through the world with a lot of stigma and shame about this diagnosis that I don't really understand. And a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, had an eating disorder. And anyway, here we are, been on this journey of regaining my mental health using a mind, body, spirit. The approach I was using at the time was not, I just was medication upon medication, and I wasn't getting better. Really important to note, right? So anyway, eventually I went back to school because I was working in the corporate world, and I reported to a CEO, and I had a lot of stress, and I went back to school to become a naturopathic doctor, back to high school at 33, and then here we are.
So what got you into naturopathic medicine? Was that, part of trying to figure out really what gets you better more naturally? Like, how did you specifically come to that?
So that same best friend, we gotta really love our best friends. So she was a nutritionist, and we had gone to university together. We raced on the UBC track team together, and she said to me, "Chris, why don't you see a naturopathic doctor?" And so I did. And interestingly enough, her and I and another colleague were going to start an organic baby formula business. And it was through the pursuit of that I ended up at a orthomolecular medicine mental health regained public forum. And I learned about a doctor named Dr. Abraham Hoffer. He's quite famous in Canada. He's passed away now, but he worked with Linus Pauling, who won 2 Nobel Prizes, one of them on his research on vitamin C. And he was a psychiatrist, but he was nutritionally oriented. So I went to both of these practitioners, my naturopathic doctor and the Dr. Hoffer, a nutritionally oriented psychiatrist. And lo and behold, starting their protocol, I had my first year where I was free from depression and anxiety, which I had not had in the 15 years.
Wow, that's incredible.
15 years prior to that, 70% or more of my time was spent in a depressive state. And then I was like, okay, there's got to be something to what these guys are doing. And the key thing for me was, it took me 2 years to get in to see Dr. Larry Chan, and a long time also to get not as much time, but a wait time anyways, to get into Dr. Hoffer. And he was 80 years old. And I'm thinking, my goodness, I know there's lots of people struggling here. Why is it taking so long for me to get help? Now, when I made the appointment with Dr. Chan, I was like, they said it's 2-year wait. And I'm like, well, I'll make the appointment. I don't know if I'm going to be here, like, because,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
indeed, I did have a second suicide attempt, while I was trying to get myself landed and grounded in this, is in some other way to support myself. And he's a acupuncturist first and foremost. So then I realized, what? I had a great job with it paying very well, and I wasn't happy. And eventually, even when I became happy with the supplement support, I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And so I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And that's one of the reasons I made the change.
That's pretty remarkable. What a story. And it's interesting because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking kind of similar. I have a similar path. I mean, I didn't have it as
Sure.
severe, like but I definitely suffered from depression and anxiety like when I was younger and growing up. And I definitely had anxiety. I never even knew I had anxiety. Now I look back and I'm like, I had
Right.
anxiety. Like I had fears, and I even used to do things like a little bit OCD where I'd have to like tap things in a certain
Yep.
way, which would mean that things are going to go well versus not go well. And so I know that I had some kind of anxiety and I didn't feel safe in my body. I mean, and I look back at when I went to an acupuncturist, one of the things I noticed was that not only were my symptoms, my physical symptoms resolving, but I started feeling
Yeah.
better
Mm.
mentally. And then I also look back and I used to eat gluten and I went gluten free and I found that I was less bloated. But then I realized like I'm less
Right.
anxious on a gluten free diet. So there's such a physical mental
Yeah.
connection. You're treating your physical body, and we had talked about this. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why I really felt connected with you and like really your background and how you approach things is that there is such a somatic aspect of the mind, like the experience in the body impacts the mind so much more. And it's interesting because many people, I think, just conventionally think that there is this separation, like the mind can't affect the body, but also the body can't affect the mind. So it's kind of this bidirectional relationship, and really addressing it like you were saying physically and through diet actually made a difference on your mind.
Yeah. What a concept. I know.
Yeah, it's
And I think
wild.
it's really lovely to look at the shift and the changes that have happened. So when I was initially struggling, we'll say starting in 1980, that's been a long, several years, right? 45 years if I'm doing the math properly. And to see the difference because there was no conversation in 1980 about the microbiome, let alone any
Right.
directional
Yeah.
relationship, right? Like you were saying,
Mhm.
back in 1980, it was deemed almost separate, like we just were living from the neck up, and we might as well just have little knees under our chins, and because
This is
nobody's talking
true.
about the body, right? And so, but
Yes.
thanks to the work
Yeah.
of people like Stephen Porges and Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate and many others, I wish I could name some women. Let's name some women like Molecules of Emotion, Candace Pert. There's
Mhm.
such
Yeah.
such advances now, so we understand that it's bi-directional. So, and now I think the conversation should be in the research, if it's not, well, you know which microbes actually, because the microbes affect this way, and then that affects
Mhm.
this way. So, and
Yeah.
we don't really have to get caught up in, and this is where I get a little frustrated with Western science, and they're always so focused on what's the one cause or the one thing. And
Mhm.
we're
Yeah.
multifactorial beings. And so,
For
if you
real.
think about
Yeah.
a tree, it doesn't have one root, right? Massive.
100%. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Like, that's such a good
And a good
perspective.
visual, right? There's this massive ecosystem underneath the ground that we don't see.
Mhm.
We just see this
Yeah.
beautiful tree. Now, that who knows? The root system could be diseased, and that's akin to wearing this mask that we walk around with a big smile on our face when we're thinking about doing awful things to ourselves. But we have to be bringing these conversations into the open air about what's going on between here and here in terms of the thoughts or the emotions, and be able to be vulnerable and authentic. And that is a shift that we can thank Brené Brown for that, because,
Yeah,
Oprah
this is
Winfrey,
true.
because, because back in, again, 1980, boy, oh boy, don't say anything. Don't tell anybody. That's what I was told actually by my psychiatrist. Oh, you know what, Chris? Do not tell anybody that you have this condition, because, and so I'm like, well, what do you mean, like, then I
Yeah.
walked out of that office feeling bad and dark and awful and
Like, it's, like,
shameful and
shameful, like
rejected,
yeah.
and like a dark, like, don't you dare disclose, because people are not going to like you. And, wow, like, that's awful, right?
Yeah. And little did we know that I think that so many other people are feeling the same way
That's right.
quietly. It's like,
Yeah.
you too? Are you also feeling this way? Like, and everybody's afraid to talk about it. And you were right. I used to watch Oprah Winfrey, and she really helped me a lot growing up because she put a name to it. She spoke about it, and she spoke about these topics that a lot of people wouldn't speak about
That's
on
right.
TV.
I mean, I remember when she decided to do, at the end of every episode, a bit of a conversation about the soul. And she got a lot of flack about that. But she pursued, and it's important. Nobody was discussing the soul or the spirit or, anything
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
true.
So I think that it's really important that we understand that, we, as humans, yes, the physical level, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's where I started. Very important. But I'll tell you the one downfall with I'll take ownership of this. I wasn't disclosing to my doctors that I had an eating disorder. As if you're a clinician listening to this, you need to be asking the right questions to the patient. And then it's all about creating that safety in that therapeutic relationship, so that the patient, even if you ask the right question, they will feel safe to answer it as well. And so
This is
and
true.
the reason I want to mention that is because I did start on a lot of supplements, but they were propping me up and filling the nutritional gaps from my horrible diet. Right? So
Mhm.
I was a
Right.
vegetarian eating no vegetables. So I was a carbitarian and a sugar addict. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. It's true. I went through that myself, and if you don't really know what to eat and you become a vegetarian, you can really deplete
Yeah.
yourself
Big time
big time.
on so many nutrients that are so important for these pathways to work in our body. So I really want to emphasize that too, because I think one of the bad reputations that the functional medicine industry has is over supplementing. And as a
Mhm.
naturopathic doctor, I am not wanting to do that. My goal is not for you to be on these supplements. My goal is for you to obviously resolve the symptom picture that is presenting for you using modalities
Mhm.
that are available to me, and not have you on 50 million supplements. That's not the end
Mhm.
game here. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that you talk about how, like, we're so multifaceted, and sometimes we do get so hung up on the studies. And of course, the studies can give us a lot of information, but there's so much behind studies. I mean, there's companies behind studies. You don't know how it's skewed. I mean, there's so many other
Yeah.
variables to the studies that it's hard to really decipher based on all of these different parts. While those parts can be really beneficial, I mean, there's one study that actually showed that mental disorders were very much linked to the gut microbiome, and that's fascinating information. It confirms what we're looking
Mhm.
into. But when we get too hung up on it, and then we stop using, and I know that you also have a spiritual perspective and that intuition. When we stop connecting to that intuition and stop acknowledging that we do have a spirit, and that's what I love about Chinese medicine, is they do actually acknowledge the
Yes.
spirit of a person, and that's part of the
Yeah.
health. And so when we acknowledge that and see that there's something more vast, and yes, we can rely on studies, and yes, we can use it as clues to the puzzle, or pieces to the puzzle. But if we solely and completely ignore the aspect of us that is intelligent and that can connect to other things that have not yet been proven, then that, I mean, can give us so much info. We can actually download information. I know this because I'm a meditator. I know that I've downloaded information, and every meditator will say the same thing. They understand that it's
That's right.
real, because you can't know that until you're in that state of such deep receptivity that you're able to download information and your body communicates with you.
Absolutely. And one of the simple statement that I love to say to people is, well, who is the teacher of science? Like, who is the teacher of science? And it's nature, right?
Yeah.
And so, we, of course, but some of the things that we study, like, for example, just before I came on this interview with you, I was researching for my new book that I'm writing about my eating disorder journey. And there was a study about sleep. And I was thinking to myself, wow, like, we really have to sort of state the obvious here to people. Like,
This is
is you
true.
needing some sleep? Like, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so it just, for me,
All you need is one really bad night of sleep and you'll know that you need sleep because of how you feel. You can't
but I was like,
concentrate.
how much money did they spend on this study? I mean, of course, so
Yeah,
sometimes I
that's
think,
true.
really, do we really need to study everything under, you get what I'm trying to say?
It's true.
But the
100%. I do.
fascinating piece, of course, the microbiome is very fascinating and interesting. And a sidebar about that for myself is I did a year of antibiotics when I was 14 to treat acne. And right.
Oh,
Yeah. And then my
interesting.
eating disorder started the year after. And then the depression, the anxiety, it all unfolded. Now, it's
That's
so
interesting.
interesting. And I think this just highlights the importance, again, of asking the right questions. And one of them is, when do you think things started for you? And in my case, I just said
Mhm,
14, but I'm going to go back even further to the in utero
mhm.
experience, right? It starts in utero for people. And right.
It
And if we
does.
have to bring in this idea that Western medicine is trying to prove at probably right this second as we're speaking, of
Mhm,
intergenerational trauma. And in fact,
mhm.
there are studies
Yeah,
about this done already. So
there are, and I think part of them were Holocaust and, how you have
well,
because
even in
our
my
DNA, it
they
makes
did a study.
sense. The DNA would have
That's right.
information because we're evolving, so it carries information so that you learn from your parents or whatever they had
Mhm.
to learn, and sometimes with that learning comes the memory of
That's right.
trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, and the in utero experience is so important, because when you were an egg in the developing fetus of your mother in her ovary, you were there as
Mhm.
a single
Mhm.
cell egg
Yeah,
in
true.
your grandmother when she was carrying your mother. So people, sometimes you have to slow down and get your head around what I just said, but it's very important, because I am adopted and I have been so fascinated with this nature versus nurture argument. And because Western medicine for many years was very focused on the gene, everything's about the genetics. And this is where I mentioned earlier that, it's actually epigenetics that's
Mhm.
important. And
Yes.
the work of Bruce Lipton bringing that to the forefront, and concept of psychoneuroimmunology. And in my own case, whenever you ask the question, and the first question I asked after that psychotic event, which was very alarming to me and of course the people around me, was, why did that happen? And how did that happen? And the answer I got was, well, it's genetic, nothing you can do. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
No, nothing?
Right.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really want to experience that again. Thank you very much. So there better be something else I can do other than take drugs, because here we are, And so I got told that there's nothing you can do, which means there's no cure. But I didn't
Mhm.
accept that. And what breaks my heart is that, right as we were talking, people are being told that right now in a doctor's office.
People listening to this, I mean, same thing, but on different it's just different levels, different types of things.
And if we bring it to the conversation to fertility, how many women are told you're not going to be able to conceive? And it's like, who are
Mhm.
we to say?
It happens all the time. Like, I can't even count it
I know.
anymore.
And that should not be like, I think as clinicians, our role is to bring hope and possibility and understanding of how the
Mhm.
body works. And there's reasons and explanations for your symptom picture and your suffering. And if
Mhm.
you aren't feeling better, I feel that it's because somebody hasn't investigated there's a stone that hasn't been turned over yet.
I agree. I really do. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of hope in the possibility, because I think even doctors need to have hope in the possibility for their patients. And I think that when they don't, it oftentimes does translate into the consciousness of the patient.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been, a beautiful journey to not only be able to then regain my mental health, but also to be able to help other people with whether it's a fertility journey or out of depression or anxiety, even bipolar disorder, whatever it might be. Because remember that these labels, and my book that I love to share about is called Beyond the Label, 10 steps to improve your mental.
So thorough.
Yeah, and the thing with it is that the label explains a constellation of symptoms, but it doesn't tell me how you got there. And that explanation is always rooted in some earlier experience that predates the diagnosis. So there's so much to us, and that I'm saying that not for people to take it like, oh goodness, but to take it from a place of like, this is where the answers lie. So the answer's there. We just have to figure it out. That's all.
And it gives a lot of hope. Like I said, and it's, what I love about talking to naturopaths is that they're very similar minded. Their approach is very similar to acupuncturists, where we're always looking for that root. So rather than saying this is a symptom, it just is what it is, we're always kind of digging, trying to figure out. It's almost like a very solution oriented field. And that's how I feel like there is no one way to treat anything. And because I think that is what gives way to more possibility. If we know that there's not one way to treat anything and that not every person's the same, then there's less likely that we're going to perceive our patients as a statistic.
That's right.
And that's where we start to dig and take that challenge.
Yeah. And many naturopathic doctors, depending on the school they go to, and it's important that they go to a accredited program, because I know that in the United States, not all states are regulated or licensed. So there are people that haven't done proper programs. But in some of, like in my schooling in Canada, acupuncture is a modality that we are taught and are licensed to use. So, but not all the schools have acupuncture. Some that's a separate 4-year program. So
yes, yeah, I have heard of that. But for that, for the reason that there's just such similarities in the medicines. And I think the big thing is how we view the body as being so forgiving. We really understand that the body is incredibly intelligent and that the body is self-healing. And it's just asking for something. It needs something, or it needs to remove something that's in the way. Right. And so there's always kind of that almost detective work that we do to try to like unravel and figure out what's going on. And as far as the mind-body connection, what are some of the biggest things or ahas that you found throughout? And I know that this could be very vast, but like, what are some of the big ones that come to mind?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to add on one thing to what you said about adding things or removing things. And one of the things that we talk about in naturopathic medicine is obstacles to cure. And they're, so an example of an obstacle to cure, and I'm not saying this from a place of judgment. It's just an observation is actually, I can share about a case. I had this woman come to see me for depression and Lyme disease, but she was a very heavy smoker. And so at some point we got, I worked, first and foremost was the depression and the Lyme. I wasn't very versed in Lyme. This is probably 15 years ago. Anyway, I found a colleague who was, and so she was helping her with that. And I was helping her with her mental health. But then at some point I had to say, I need to have a conversation with you about smoking, because this is an obstacle to cure. And anyway, and
true.
so at this point, she was very focused on the Lyme. And then I said, I'm really concerned about this chronic cough here that you have going on. Could you please get that checked out? Because I didn't have access to diagnostics myself. I have to refer for that. Anyway, she went and she did a chest X-ray, and she had lung cancer.
Yeah. Oh,
and she died.
Wow.
So I remember saying to her, like, we do not need to be focused on your Lyme disease. We need to be focused on, so this is It's a very good
Right.
example of an obstacle to cure. And that
Yeah.
obstacle, obviously, it took her life.
Wow. That's
So it's
terrible.
a very empowering story to acknowledge that we do have to have these conversations about things, and they're hard
Mhm.
conversations because, we're going into the area of addictions now. And,
Right.
so
It's interesting you say that because, like, what I find oftentimes is people get very strict about their diet, they're strict about their supplements, they're strict about everything in their life, how to exercise, what to do, everything's A plus, like down the line. However, though they're so focused on that they forget, and I do think that there is an addiction to stress.
yes, totally.
We don't realize
Yes.
that, but we can actually get addicted to stress
Mhm.
hormones. And Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this often. We can get really addicted to them. It can make us feel like we're in control. It's a fake sense of control, but it's not
Yeah,
real. And it's not really helping us. So it's like we can do all of these other things, but until we address that foundation, that's kind of like the sabotager of everything else, we're not really going to
that's
get
right.
better.
Yeah, I mean, I will acknowledge within myself as somebody who is this type A overachiever perfectionist type that you described. I mean, I had to let her go a long time ago because it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But you do speak to, again, a very important point that I want to talk about in my new book, which is this journey to ultimately acceptance. And our industry, this industry that we were calling the health industry right now, from a nutrition perspective, just that one modality, there's so much adversarial conversation going on. You've got carnivores on the one extreme and vegans on the other, and everything in between. And I said to my best friend, I feel like the nutrition industry has bipolar disorder. Like, there's just so much swinging. And so the
It's
conversation
true.
that I want to bring to the table is, who's actually looking at the reasons behind why you want to have a perfect body, and where is that coming
Mhm.
from, and why are we not actually
Mhm.
accepting ourselves, and are we creating more problems as clinicians by saying cut out wheat, dairy, sugar, eggs, corn, inflammatory foods, and dairy? Are we, what kind of obsessiveness are we creating with, and I'm somebody who has been looking at this for a long time. So I went on a tangent to say, because in terms of Joe Dispenza, who I value and love studying his work, I even had to say to myself, man, am I addicted to drama? When my life gets steady, do I actually go looking for something to make it unsteady? And that was a
Mhm.
big observation. And so anyway, we could talk. We probably are going to have
Yeah.
another call here because we
No,
gotta go
no.
on that. So, but I want to answer your question about the mind body relationship and what were some of the ahas for myself. And there is so many, but I think the biggest one was actually after so I've had 3 suicide attempts in total. And the last one was getting to be long ago, as we continue on in time, but it was in 2009. So it wasn't like it wasn't last week, obviously, but it was while I was
Mhm.
practicing as a clinician. And I'm going to mention this
Mhm.
because this is, you work in the fertility space, that it was in a postpartum state.
Mm.
But it was,
Yeah.
so this conversation about mental health is important for every age group and every stage of our lives, but in particularly very critical in the postpartum window. And I'm going to extend the window though, because I don't think 12 months, I think at the 12-month mark, when they say you're out of the woods, so to speak, you're not. You're
Mhm.
just getting into the woods. You're just getting
Mhm.
started. And so I really think the first 5 years postpartum is when women struggle, not within the first 12 months. So, I mean, you can struggle in that time frame, but for me it was, anyway, a little bit delayed, if you will. And then I
Mhm.
know science people listening might argue, we say to me, well, that's not postpartum, Chris. But in my mind, it really was in that window. It was a very delicate, anyway. So my point being that the person who helped me the most was a colleague, another naturopathic doctor, who was the first person to teach me that I do not need to believe every thought that I think.
Mm.
So
That's
your
powerful.
thoughts create neuropeptides. Your neuropeptides affect the hormone, the glands, which produce hormones. And then if we're talking about the adrenal gland, that produces cortisol, but there's also epinephrine and norepinephrine, and those are more neurotransmitter based. So let's just speak with cortisol because many people are familiar with that. That then feeds back up to the brain and says to the nervous system, stress or no stress, danger or safety, sympathetic or parasympathetic. And so this is called psychoneuroimmunology, which is a fancy word to mean your thoughts affect your physiology. So when he said, so he taught me this 4R approach, which is the first R is recognize what you're thinking. Like take the thought out. If this pen represents a thought, take it out, look at it and ask, are you serving me right now? Or are you sabotaging me? Are you hurting or helping? Are you inner critic based or inner cheerleader? Bully or friend? Like what side are you on here? What team are you playing for? You know, the stress team or the safety team? So most of my thoughts, if not 100%, 110%, were inner critic sympathetic, all about what a horrible human being I am. So once you've recognized that you are having thoughts based in problematic thinking, then your next second step is to refrain from following them. This is where meditation is so helpful. So I'm not saying to suppress anything, but I'm just saying we don't carry on the conversation. We just set the conversation down. And then the third step is we relax into the body. We take 2 deep breaths. We connect with nature. We get out of our heads, if you will, because the egoic mind is a very busy place. It's busy in my head, very busy. And there's a lot of traffic that's being directed, right? And it's like, we need a little bit of a moment of a reprieve here. Just a little heartbeat of stillness. And you get that if you give the egoic mind a job. You say, hey man, look at that tree outside. And then, okay, the ego, it does ultimately want to serve you, but the problem with it is it's based in the past often and protecting you from the pain of the past. And we don't need that belief anymore now in this present moment. And so by doing the breath, then the 4th step is to resolve to repeat those first 3 steps over and over and over and over and over. So when Dr. Hughes taught me this, I said to him, well, I'm going to be doing this all day long. Right. And he's like, perfect.
So that's great. It's a practice, right?
And just like we go to the gym, right, to get a nice toned bicep or do sit-ups, get a 6-pack, we need to go to spiritual gym. Yeah. And so listen, and I remember saying to him, well, you're not going to prescribe me some St. John's wort? Like, come on, man. Like, you just want me to, what is this going to, this is, I was super negative. I was even like, this isn't going to help me, which in and of itself is a problematic thought.
Right? Yeah, that's so interesting. It's all awareness, right?
And so that process, which I've now expanded because I'm still this recovering overachiever. I call it the 7 R's now, but really the first 4, those are the first 4. So recognize, refrain, relax, repeat. The 5th step I add is related to what I was talking about in terms of psychoneuroimmunology. So we do want to take that problematic thought we recognized and see if we can say something opposite that is helpful. Because now I used to roll my eyes at people who would say to me, hey, Chris, change your thoughts, change your life, or do an affirmation. I would be like, roll my eyes and probably stomp out of the room because I felt like people were implying that I was intentionally causing my issues with, on purpose. But this isn't the case. We have a subconscious mind and it is constantly dialoguing and we're not always aware. But when you can bring that into your conscious awareness, then from that place, you can create a new empowering belief that will carry you forward. And this is, you have to remember, when I'm listening to myself talk, I'm like, gosh, Chris, this sounds very simple. And honestly, it is. However, I've been doing this for daily since 2009, committed to this practice. So, and I know that if you commit to acknowledging what you're thinking and seeing if you can shift your thinking, the reason why this is so important is it shifts your physiology. And this is what you were talking about. So now we no longer are on the cortisol kick. Now we're going to be more on the parasympathetic. And I just want to say one more thing and tie this up because we were talking about nutrition a moment ago. One of my huge pet peeves about the health industry is everybody's focused on what diet is perfect for you, but nobody is talking about the state in which you are in when you're eating that food. And digestion,
Yes.
my friend, is
Right.
a parasympathetic state, and most of us are in a sympathetic state.
Totally. It's so funny because my husband sometimes he'll like run out to work and he works in the ER and he'll take something and eat it in the car. I'm like, don't do that. You got to just, even if it's like wake up 5 minutes earlier, just give yourself time to sit down and eat, because when you're doing that, so like, the fight or flight or the sympathetic versus parasympathetic, sympathetic isn't always necessarily like high stress. It could be just high alert. So driving, you're typically going to go into sympathetic mode. That doesn't mean that you're like completely stressed out either, but you're like very focused. And what does that do? It shuts down the digestion, like you just said. And so it's not great to eat in the
No,
car.
no, and I think this as humans, I mean, the ER is a very busy, it's a very busy place, and it's also going to be, high, probably higher amped up vibration wise, but it doesn't necessarily have to be stressful, right? And I think,
Right.
and the thing
Yeah.
is that we've become used to, I think, as humans, multitasking constantly, and and the thing is that's not actually, research shows, coming back to the research word, actually shows that it's not,
Yeah.
it's better to be doing, if you're going to be eating, like, let's just eat.
Yeah.
Because most people are chomp, chomp, swallow. They're eating on the run, eating while they're driving, going through drive-throughs, and eating and digestion starts with when? It doesn't start when you put the food in your mouth. It starts when you're cooking the
Yeah.
food, right?
Yeah,
Sense of
smelling,
smell.
looking, seeing,
Yeah.
visual, like you could see it. It's so interesting because I started noticing when we go to restaurants, every time my husband and both of us look at the food, look at the menu, we start to salivate because I hear him swallowing and I'm like, you're salivating too. Like as we're talking about the food that we're about to order and we're just reading it off the menu, we're starting to
Yes.
salivate. So it's crazy, but it's like the mental, like as soon as we know we're about to eat, that's how we salivate, which is like you said, it's so true. Like being mindful
Yeah.
with it starts to make you salivate. And why saliva is so important, because it has all these enzymes that help you digest. So it starts in, the
That's right.
mouth.
But it starts with a sense of smell. That sends a signal up
Yes.
to the brain that then sends a signal on the vagus nerve that, hey, guess what? Stomach food's going to be coming. So let's get ready for it. But the thing is, when we just unwrap and then down the hatch, the stomach's like, hey, what the hell, man? What the heck? Vagus nerve. What are you doing, buddy? Yeah,
What's
what are you
happening
doing, man?
here?
You're fired, right? So it's like, so, and then, we have this sequelae of symptoms. Digestive people have bloating and indigestion and heartburn and constipation, none of which we should accept as acceptable, because none of it is. But it's all, but what I find is people aren't focusing on what we're talking about. They're focusing on,
Yeah.
oh, well, eat more fiber or drink more water. And that may be so. Absolutely. I'm not discounting that. But who's saying to you,
Yeah.
tell me about what your stress is like, and how are you
Yeah.
prepping your meals?
It's so interesting because people ignore that aspect of ourselves because it's hard to
Yeah.
quantify.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I could talk to you for
Yeah. Well,
hours.
I'll just have to come back.
I think I might have to have you back, honestly, because we can like get into all kinds of conversations.
Yes.
But you're right, though. I mean, really with digestion, I think a lot of these things, I always find that people will not, it's so hard to really quantify, especially if you're already in a mental state. Just like you said, like, don't believe your thoughts. You become your
Mhm.
thoughts. You identify with your thoughts. You really believe that that is just the only way because you're
Yeah.
already in it. And I'm not sure, was it Einstein that said you can't solve a problem with the same state of mind that
That's right.
created it?
That's right.
Well, I mean, if you're already in the state of mind, it's so hard to see. And so that's one of the reasons why somatic work can be so effective, and even just getting into your breath and your body sensations, because you kind of like create a space. It's creating space between the thoughts and your body and your sensation being in the present moment. And a lot of what you're saying is really what Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about how our petri dish becomes our blood and all the stress hormones that come
Yeah.
with it. And just a quick note for people who don't know what epigenetics means, because they're hearing it, maybe for the first time. Can you explain why that's important, how our genes can be impacted by our environment?
Yeah. So this is interesting. So they've done studies on identical twins. So identical twins who were separated at birth due to adoption, so different environments. So if everything is genetic, these are identical twins genetically, you would expect them to have the same outcomes, health outcomes, disease patterning, conditioning, and they don't. And so this is where the research came from, this concept that actually the genes are can be the blueprint, but they're not your destiny. And it's about the environment, i.e., the trauma that you may have experienced, the nutrition that you may have been given, the other piece is this chemical component, the environment. So there's many chemicals in the environment. In fact, in umbilical cord blood, they did a study across 10 babies. They found 270 contaminants. So we
Wow.
are being born,
That's crazy.
already with our environmental cups maxed out the minute we exit the womb. And then we go into the world. So what this idea of epigenetics means that, so the gene part is, like I said, it's the blueprint, but the switch that turns it on or off. So let's just say not the blueprint, because that better analogy. The gene would be the light bulb, but the switch to turn it on or off is the epigenetic piece. And these are the environmental factors that I was just talking about. So the nurturing that you received, whether you had a trauma, any form of abuse, even big T traumas or even little T traumas, like somebody stealing your lunch every day at school, I mean, I was bullied in school. I mean, bullied. Okay, I say it was bullying, and then I'm shrugging my shoulders because I'm like, well, was it? Basically they formed this I Hate Christina club. But for someone with the high level of sensitivity that I came out of the womb with, and the belief that I'm not liked or wanted, that was hurtful.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
it's so
So
relevant. It's so, what's the
relatable,
word? Not,
or
there's a word. It basically is like, it's not relevant, where it depends on your like
well, actually, I'll give
experience.
you a good example though about that. So this is actually, maybe this is an example I would say in epigenetics. So for myself, because of my trauma wound, and adoption is the only trauma where the adoptee is expected to be grateful. It's important to think about that. Now, some people take offense to that quote, but it's important to think about that because, anyway, so my point is that my son had the same experience in the same grade as I did. They started some little girl who probably had a crush on him started an I Hate Noah club. And he came home from school and he told me that. And my heart sank and I was like, oh, and then immediately flashed back to my experience. And then he said, but Mom, it's totally fine because nobody joined.
Oh, wow. It's like break the chain. It just like
And it didn't
shifted.
faze him at all. And for me
Wow.
though, I walked around that whole school year like with no friends. Right. So it really, the impact, that's a really good example of two experiences. And epigenetics is another way you could look at it, is the influences that are outside of you that affect the inside of you. Right. But when you ingest the food, I mean, that gets inside of you and that can affect, and chemicals and everything and this is where let's look at cancer. Here's another big subject that people, I hear this all the time with mental health and cancer, well, so-and-so has it, so I'm going to get it. And I'm like, no, you're not them. You're not your
Right.
parents. And so, and a great example, so the family that I was adopted into, my grandmother and her siblings, there were 6 of them. Every single one of them had cancer and died of cancer. All 6 of them, all
Wow.
6. Now, so therefore, if it's all about genes, then you would expect every one of their offspring, so my mother and her first cousins, would all also get cancer and die from cancer. Well, ask me how many of them have got cancer and died from cancer. 0. So it's not all about the genes.
Yeah,
So I
it's
will say
not.
that it's
And
not
I actually think that the reason why you will see things like that happen where the kids get it or they have similar responses or symptoms is because of their environment as well. Their environment's the same. Like that, people don't realize that the trauma is the same, the culture that they're growing up in is the same, the food is the same. Then, but so so people don't really think about that aspect of the fact that you're in
if
that
it's run,
family.
if there's something that's been going on for generations, right? But this is
Yeah,
where, we wanna really understand that, okay, but yes, what have you actually
we can
changed? Yeah,
change
what
it.
have you actually changed? And is it
Yeah,
really genetic though? Right? So it's again,
yeah,
it's a very powerful, because I also think because when we just play the card, well, there's nothing I can do, it's just as in my genetic blueprint, then I sort of feel like we're being victims and we're defeatist, right? Because
yeah.
listen, I don't want to be, I really, and I don't mean this from, it's going to sound negative the way I'm going to say this. I didn't want to be on a mental health roller coaster swinging from depression to mania. I'm feeling very unsettled and like I'm on this roller coaster for my entire life. Like that to me did not seem like an option. So I wanted to learn, well, how else can I navigate my mental health so that I can feel a little bit more stable and living in a joyful way. And in the back of my book, I talk about 23 myths that I was told. Things like I shouldn't have children because I'm going to pass this condition on
Wow.
because it's genetic, right? And I think,
Yeah.
goodness,
That's insane way of living. I mean, it's just so crazy because you could say that about
right?
anything.
Well, and the thing is, it's very fear based. And
Yeah.
when we were talking about sympathetic versus parasympathetic, and I was using different words to represent, two other words I'd like to say are, or four other words, is sympathetic. Another word is fear versus love, and or ego versus soul. So we want to always be asking the question, how can I move to love? And if we're talking about suicide and mental health, I mean, if anyone has suicidal ideations or is contemplating taking their life, I can tell you that the furthest from love that they're ever gonna be. And my job as a clinician is how do I guide them back?
Yeah.
And two important questions I ask every patient, and I love, people that are listening can answer these for themselves, but a scale of 1 to 10 for both, 10 being the best, how much do you love yourself? And the second question is, and the second one to answer is, how much self-compassion do you have? And I've yet to have somebody say 9 out of 10, 9 or more, even 8 or
Yeah.
more for both out of 10. I've yet to have a human, and it's been 20 years. I'm waiting for somebody. So,
Wow. It's amazing because of your story. I feel like you can help so many more people than had you not gone through it. So it's so interesting how you don't want to go through something like that, but because of that, it almost, should you go down the path that you did, it initiates you into this incredible greater calling to help so many people. And I feel like you're doing God's work. I mean, I think when you answer that call, it really is, it's incredibly profound because when people are going through that and they're speaking to you, knowing that you went through that, so that you're not just kind of sitting there with your degree, just talking at them, like they really understand that you walk through it. There's a different sense of
yeah,
trust and knowing that you understand them on a deeper level. So I think that that's really remarkable.
thank you. I've had to answer this question. I've been on both sides of that suicide conversation, and I've had to answer the question, well, why am I still here? And how come? And listen, I mean, I'm not condoning that as an answer, because here's my view. Suicide is a temporary situation. It's a temporary situation, and or sorry, like the feeling that being in that dark cloud is temporary, but the decision to take your life is permanent.
Yeah.
So it's a permanent solution to a temporary situation. But I want to, emphasize here that it isn't the solution. And I think I just had a colleague who lost her son at 18, like 2 weeks ago now.
Sorry
Yeah,
to hear
and
that.
I thank you. I mean, I'm just dumbfounded because I work in this space. I dedicate my book to saving souls from suicide. I'm getting a bit emotional, and I'm like, I've met this
Yeah.
person. this young soul. And it's sad, but at the same time, this is where my spiritual beliefs help me with these very difficult things that are hard to have answers for. And I accept that this is not my way to leave, and
yes,
I would like to, I think that we need to be talking to young people more about what's really going on. And I know for me, it started at that same age. My suicidal ideation started at the same age, 18, 19. There's a lot of pressure on these young people. And I don't think the pressure's any different than when we were going through it. I just think that, the pressure's not different, but the society is different, with these things. And I think that, your 20s is not a mental illness. Your 20s aren't a mental illness. Okay. But it's a difficult stage of life.
It really is. And I think that you're talking about the phones and there's so many aspects. The
Social media.
Positive part is that you hear other people telling stories and you realize you're not alone. That's like the one positive about the time that we're living in, that it's no longer secret. And I know that it's same thing with fertility. Like 10 years ago, people weren't talking about it as much as they are now. And then people are starting to realize, oh, I'm not the only one. There's other people going through this too. And I think that aspect of it is healing. On the other hand, we're constantly being bombarded with too much information. Our nervous system is going haywire. There's chaos. It's almost a chaotic energy. And we're not grounded enough. We're not able to really get quiet and connect with our bodies the way, our bodies are able to help us. And connecting and getting quiet and becoming more conscious and aware of our thoughts, because we're so sucked into this addiction, which is, our phones and devices. And so, I'm telling you, I can keep talking to you for hours. I think you're such a deep-minded person. You're really interesting to talk to. And you also have I'm really amazed with how you're writing books about these things and really taking your information and translating it to help so many people. I really admire that. I have to say, and I know that I'm going to probably have you on again because we can keep talking, but I really, really admire it. And I really love connecting with you as a professional and as a human, as a person. And I would love to know, for the listeners, how can people find you? How can they find your books?
Yes. And that's a good segue from us talking about phones, but basically,
true.
It is definitely, I think you highlight such an important point, that there are positives with some of these advances, but yet we do have to navigate, just like every other addictive substance in our lives. We really have to develop, a relationship that's in service of us truly. And so you can find me on those platforms, Instagram, Dr. Chris Bjorndal, and my website. My last name is a bit challenging to spell, but it'll be in the show notes, right? So
it'll be in the show notes. Yeah. Everything's going to be in the show notes.
Instagram, Facebook, and that's it. That's all I can handle. I think I have a YouTube channel, my website. And then the books, they are available on online platforms like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and in Canada, Indigo or Chapters. And yes, so grateful if people would check them out. Beyond the Label, The Essential Diet, Moving Beyond, a Journal into Self-Discovery. And the fourth one is a compilation called From Shadows to Light, a Whole Human Approach to Mental Health.
Is that the one you're going to be working on? What's your okay, that's another one. Amazing. I think I was just so impressed. It's incredible.
Thank you so much.
Yes, really incredible.
And I really, really love talking to you. I remember when we were doing the summit, I was just like, when they asked a question, I'm just like, and you answered, I'm like, yep, exactly what Michelle said, exactly, just.
Yeah, you could tell when you meet what I call almost like soul tribe people, like people that you feel immediate connection with. You speak the same language. It was immediate that I felt that with you. And then as soon as you start talking, and I was like, I really need to get her on the podcast because she's really interesting and deep. Yeah. I'm like, this is great.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure.
Take care.